deficit that he has. Beyond that, though, if other guys like Dixon are going to get involved, and they need some help and some bad results from Rossi and Newgarden to get in there. But I think right now, if Alexander Rossi gets a result or is able to get some points gained on Newgarden, I mean, he's only 16 out coming into this weekend. I think certainly it casts some doubt on whether or not Joseph Newgarden can win his second title in 3 years. I think it creates a real possibility Alexander Rossi will be a first-time IndyCar Series champion.
Well, look at Alexander Rossi, and I mean, he's no stranger to first-timers. Remember, he was a rookie when he won the Indianapolis 500, and all eyes are on him. He just renewed a good contract with Andretti. He stays with Andretti. There was rumors about him going to Penske. Let's not go to sleep on Alexander Rossi at all whatsoever. Now, talk with us a little bit about Alexander Rossi. I mean, this driver is the real deal. Is he really as good as we are watching, or are we just watching a driver mature?
I think right now, still maturity process. I mean, he's still sometimes a little over aggressive than he should be at times. I think that gets him into trouble. But I think he's starting to harness that a little bit more. I think you saw that at Indy when, it wasn't there. He held back, held second, and took that instead of going after an over-aggressive move and possibly taking himself and Pagano at the end. But I think ultimately, you look at the scenarios right now, the pressure right now is on Joseph Newgarden. I'd say even though, yes, he did win at Mid-Ohio, the fact of the matter is I think we're coming into a set of rounds here right at the end of the season where Rossi, I think, has the clear edge if you go by the aggressive and nature of places like Gateway. And even though, Newgarden won there recently, you still have to like Rossi's chances at Pocono and Portland and Laguna Seca. So it's not a done deal yet, and I think certainly Joseph Newgarden's going to have to face an onslaught from Rossi in order to secure this title.
Today is, today is qualifications for the ABC Supply 500 down at Pocono, and then tomorrow's the race. Talk with us. I mean, Pocono's a kind of a different course, if you will. Only just a couple courses are kind of that triangle, if you will. It's not the tricky triangle. I think it's called something different. But I could be. Am I right about that? Is that in New York? But either which way, talk with us about the Pocono track. Both NASCAR and IndyCar race there. It's a popular track for both IndyCar and NASCAR fans. Talk with us about Pocono, Pennsylvania.
Well, obviously, the 2.5 mile layout, 3 different lakes on the straightaways, 3 different quarter bankings. The only thing that I have a problem with, though, Tom, is that they're only allowing 2 hours of practice time for the cars. After the bad accident involving Robert Wickens last year, I think they would take some things so the drivers get more used to it and realize how aggressive they can be and how aggressive they can't be. I just think that's a cause for trouble, and I think the early laps are going to be a little nervous for me. Guys try to be too aggressive and not knowing the bounds. And hopefully we don't have what happened to Robert last year happen to somebody else today. They're coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we've been following Robert Wickens for a while. And how good was it to see him out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? I follow him on Twitter, and he's got an Instagram blog and a couple other blogs that I follow. And in his rehab, it's just really been coming along. And it's so good to see him come along. Obviously, his owner, and I mean that in the contents of a team ownership, not a human ownership, just because we have to make sure that we make that clear these days. The owner of his team, with Schmidt Motorsports, obviously suffered a horrific accident down in Orlando many years ago and is a quadriplegic. And he's been ability to own a team, run a team, always at the track, and even drive a car is amazing. What kind of insight do you think that's given to him with Robert Wickens to have that kind of a leadership going through what he's going through?
Well, certainly it's an assistance because obviously it's a tough battle for Sam. And I think that's going to be alleviated now that McLaren is taking over a majority of the operations of the program starting in 2020. I think that's you can only do it for so long, and I think Sam's starting to wear out, because, he's got a strong mind, et cetera, but having the lesser options and stuff like that's really started to put the wear on him. I think that's part of the reason this merger happened with McLaren. So, less of the burden is on him and him alone. But, I think it certainly provides the window of opportunity for Robert. And whether he comes back or not, I think he certainly will be better from it.
All right, let's kind of go through the standings here. Obviously, we talked about Joseph Newgarden and Alexander Rossi. We mentioned in passing Simon Pattison, but Simon Pattison going on to Pocono. What are your thoughts with Penske there?
If he has any chance to win the championship, he's got to win the race. I think that's the only option he's got because I just don't like his chances when we get to places like Portland and the closer at Laguna Seca. He's got to max out, I'd say, either at Pocono and or Gateway, St. Louis, whatever you want to call it, to have any realistic chance of making up the deficit where he's at least 60 points behind at this point. So I think he's really going to have to try to find a way to win one, if not both of the remaining oval races to have a chance.
So his teammate Will Power, Penske, obviously I don't think is in line for a championship, but you always got to like to look at Will Power and where they're at. He's at.
I think right now, for Will Power's confidence, he's got to get back in the winner's circle right now. I mean, he's on the verge of a winless season. I think no one saw that coming. And I tell you, those things really mess up with your head as far as your confidence levels. So I think he really needs to win one of these last four races to get some confidence brewing back into his corner looking ahead to 2020.
We're talking about the chipper again. I think maybe not for the first time, obviously, clearly not for the first time because Scott Dixon is one of his drivers. But I think for the first time in a couple of years, we're talking about Chip Ganassi Racing having a successful season that teamed up with Scott Dixon and rookie Felix Rosenthal. And then Scott Dixon also set to initiate testing of the new aero screen. So let's talk about Chip Ganassi, Scott Dixon, the aero screen testing, and of course, Felix Rosenthal, which is a key component to the success of this team in 2019.
Well, they are doing like the same route as Formula One. They are applying the halo for 2020. Call it what you like, but I think that's the way to go right now to protect head injuries. I think that's been alleviated greatly in Formula One, and hopefully I'll transfer over to IndyCar without a problem, especially with all the practice cars, with cars get on their side at Indy during practice because they're going so fast, and the crash speed drops are so instant. I think that's inevitable right there. So the halo, I think, certainly is going to be a help. The big thing, I think, looking ahead to 2020 for Ganassi is that they keep some driver continuity because, let's face it, even though, Dixon's won championships, he's gone through three different teammates the last 3 years. So being able to keep Rosenqvist around, I think, certainly boosts his chances. It also certainly boosts Rosenqvist's chances for more success next year because the transfer information certainly has to go back to square one every time you bring a new teammate into the mix. And I think that'll certainly help the Iceman's chances keeping Rosenqvist around for a second year looking at 2020.
917-889-8516 is our digits if you want to call in and talk IndyCar. We're going to be merging on into college football kickoff with Rick Riggin, our official college football contributor, and Matthew's going to stick around for that here in just a few moments. And then in the second hour, it's all mock draft. It's myself, Adam Jividan, Super Browns fan, going to be breaking down tonight's game, obviously between the Colts and the Browns, but also doing our mock draft. And Ed Kracz, beat writer for the Philadelphia Eagles, is going to help us break down and analyze that. And so is Rick Riggin. It's going to help us analyze the pick. It's our official mock draft week here on The Balance. Let's talk a little bit about Ryan Hunter-Reay, the other Andretti driver there. We're talking about all the Andrettis except for Marco Andretti. I know we like to make jokes about that, but Ryan Hunter-Reay, Andretti Motorsports, what are your thoughts there, Matt?
Looking ahead, I think the question, obviously, with Hunter-Reay now that he is, going to turn 38, 39 next year is how many years left in the tank does he have? As much as you like to see these guys hang in there, you don't want to see them struggle to the point where Elio was coming apart and Tony TK's had his struggles. So you'd hate to see that happen to Ryan, but I think he'll stay around for at least one more year, if not two, and we'll see what happens beyond that. But it's tough seeing these guys that have done so much success, former series champions, former IndyCar champions, they're, back markers. So let's just hope that doesn't happen to Hunter-Reay and some of these other guys that are getting up there in age.
Let's get into another team here, another stable, if you will, and that's Rahal Letterman Racing. Rahal Letterman Leggin Racing, my apologies, Graham Rahal, and my favorite guy to mispronounce his name, so I'm just going to go with his last name, Soto, the only Japanese driver in the field, so you know who I'm talking about. Rahal Letterman, RLL, what are your thoughts there, Matt?
I think looking ahead at 2020, the big thing is they need to re-sign Sato. As much as I like Graham Rahal, I just don't think the future is with Graham Rahal right now unless they are looking for another driver. I mean, there's several decent prospects at Indy Lights, but I don't think any of them really are what they're looking for at this point. So I think the big thing on their need list for 2020 is being able to re-sign Takuma Sato for next season.
Let's go on down over to Errol Schmidt, Peterson Motorsports. We talked a little bit about that team with Wickens, but let's talk a little bit about, again, we know what they've got coming up in 2020 with McLaren in Honda and teaming up with that. One of my personal favorite drivers as a fan and not as a broadcaster or a media guy is James Hinchcliffe. I really like him. I enjoy talking with him. I've had a chance to get to know him over the years, and I've had a chance to know him since he's been in the Indy Lights series. So my personal favorite is James Hinchcliffe. What do we say about him?
Well, obviously, Hitch is going to be part of the McLaren deal. That's already been confirmed. The question right now is Marcus Ericsson going to stay in the U.S. or he's going to head back to Europe? The rumors continue to swirl that he is looking back to Europe and possibly getting back in the line for maybe a future F1 ride, if not a ride in sports cars. So question marks about that, and then whether or not they could get Colton Herta or Oliver Askew as part of the McLaren connection. I think there's a lot of things looking ahead to for McLaren, Schmidt, Peterson to the next season, and who they're able to bring into the fold. And obviously they can bring in a Colton Herta. That certainly sets their future path as far as where they're going and what they're looking ahead to down the road the next several years.
Well, we talked about Colton Herta. Colton Herta is the real deal, but we'll see what happens though. But I guess I want to just diverse here just a second for purposes of conversation, just because he is who he is. Fernando Alonso obviously separated ties with McLaren. McLaren decided to go their own separate ways as far as how they are doing things moving forward in 2020 and moving away from Formula One into IndyCar. Let me put on my tinfoil hat here. Is this a plan or a conspiracy? Let's feed into the conspiracy theories that we're trying to get a full-time ride for Fernando Alonso, not necessarily in 2020. Certainly there's some bad blood between McLaren and Fernando Alonso, and for obvious reasons that is, and we could discuss that on another show another time. But Fernando Alonso and McLaren coming to IndyCar, are we going to see a full-time ride for Fernando Alonso in IndyCar? I'll just say it. Is that what's going to happen?
I don't think so. I think that Alonso's made it clear that the full-time ride in IndyCar was never his goal. His goal was to run the Indy 500, which he could still do next year. And I think Schmidt and Zach Brown have said that they would provide an extra car for Alonso if he is willing to return for Indy in 2020. But I just don't think – I think we've overblown it just a little bit. I don't think that it was ever a desire for Alonso to be the full-time man. That's part of the reason why I think they had Scott Dixon possibly with the deal last year, is because he was going to be the full-time man while Alonso was going to run Indy. And I think you're going to see the same thing here with Colton Herta running the full schedule, and then Alonso maybe coming back for another shot at the Indy 500. But I don't think a full-time ride was ever in the interest or the desire range for Fernando Alonso. He's at the point of his career where I think he is picking and choosing his races. I think he wants to run, the 24 Hours of Daytona again, 24 Hours of Le Mans, and those things. I don't think he is committed to a full-time ride in anything. He hasn't committed to the super season in FIA WEC for this upcoming year, 2019-2020. So that tells me I think he is just picking and choosing his events. I don't think the interest of being a full-time driver is in his plans for the foreseeable future.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up this segment and get into our college football kickoff. as well as our NFL mock draft coming up. But I do want to bring on with us who's taking a few moments. I know you were up late last night, Steve, with the Xfinity race. I appreciate you taking some time. Obviously, we wanted to make sure we had you on today to talk